Okay, so welcome to this lecture, and we will be discussing about the new normal and how we can use science, technology, and society studies in order to be able to understand what this new normal thing is all about. So we're doing this because we want to contextualize all our learnings in our present context, which is, of course, we've been talking a lot about new normal and what does it really mean for us and how do we really normalize a new normal. So in this video, we will discuss about the definition and usage of the term new normal across time. And we're going to also be discussing about the normalization process theory by May and Finch. And basically, this talks about how a certain technology, when it is introduced in an organization or an institution, how does it become routinized? How does it become a part or integrated in a given social context? So that's normalization process theory. So we've been hearing the phrase since this pandemic started, new normal, we're entering the new normal, education in the new normal, business in the new normal, family life and relationships in the new normal. But what does really new normal mean? Well, actually, it's not a really big scientific term. Basically, it is a previously unfamiliar or atypical situation that has become standard, usual, or expected. And of course, in the time of COVID-19, wherein a lot of our relationships and interactions have changed in terms of medium because a lot of restrictions have been pressed upon us because of social distancing and fear of contagion, and of course, taking care of those who are sick and the frontliners and those who are poor, etc., etc. Of course, we have to change the way that we do things, and these things that we do are not the usual things that we do. But we've already been more than half a year in this pandemic, and definitely this unusual things like wearing a mask, social distancing, communicating with relatives using online means. These are unusual things in the past, but now it's usual. It's something that we have integrated into our lives because we have to, and therefore this has become a new normal. To be more specific and detailed about the definition of new normal, it could be understood as a significant and likely permanent departures from long-standing traditional normative conditions or standards, which we call the old normal, have emerged in our nation's economic, political, and social institutions, in major organizations, within those institutions, in a variety of social norms and behaviors. So let's segmentize the definition so that we can understand. So it's significant and likely permanent. So of course, significant because it's needed to be done in this pandemic. It's likely permanent. Like for example, I feel like even after this pandemic, all of the skills and all of the traditions that we have gained because of online learning will still be put to use even if we reintegrate our lives back after the pandemic. And it's a departure from long-standing normative traditions or standards. That's why it's difficult, because we've been so used to going out, taking public transportation, meeting with our friends on a daily basis, being out of the house more than 2/3 of the day. Working outside the house, and being a private person inside the house. These are some of the long-standing traditions and ways of life that we have had in the many years that we've been living in this world. And then suddenly, because of the pandemic, we are now moving away from this long-standing normative conditions or standards and replacing them with new ways of life. That's why, especially during the early days of this pandemic, it has become a little bit difficult for us to adapt, because we are already wired into the social ways of life that we have had in the past. And we call these things like taking public transportation, going into classrooms, meeting with our friends outside, being at the mall during weekends, making gimmicks, going to the bar, as old normal. Have emerged in our nation's economic, political, and social institutions. So definitely the way we do services, goods trading has changed. No, a lot of businesses have moved towards e-commerce because again, social distancing. Political. Well, of course, there are a lot of political processes that had to be put online, and then people in institutions are in skeletal force so that we just decrease the amount of humans in a given space to assure physical and social distancing. And generally, all social institutions, the family relations have changed, right? The way we do schools have changed. The way we do church has already changed. And in major organizations as well, banking has changed. The way companies, food and beverage, tourism companies have also changed. And of course, with all those changes from an institutional level, we expect also behavioral changes from the people that are part of that social institution and largely society. But just so you know, this is not the first time that we've been hearing new normal. It's just that we hear that every day, and it's being broadcasted by media every day, that it feels like it's the first time, but it really isn't. And a study has looked into when journalistic publications have uttered or have mentioned the word new normal in their publications. And here are some of the milestones or timestamps where we see a lot of that being said in journalistic articles, like after World War One, World War Two, after bombings and gun shootings, definitely after the 2001 Twin Tower attack, after the economic recession in the United States, after the call for climate change addressing and global warming, and of course now in COVID-19 pandemic. And if you see the commonalities of all of the instances wherein there is a large mentioning of the term new normal in journalistic publications, you would notice that all of them are crisis situations, war and conflict, disasters, environmental issues, economic crisis, and now we have the pandemic. So usually we transition to a new normal when there is a big crisis that basically affects or disrupts, human systems, behavioral systems, social systems. Now, we go to the question, how do we really integrate a new normal in our lives and in our social systems? A good way to understand it from the perspective of science, technology, and society studies is through the normalization process theory that was proposed by May and Hinch in 2008. This was actually inspired by a study about teledermatology. Teledermatology is, providing medical care via distance and computer-mediated communications. So it was inspired by that, and May and Hinch thought na maybe we could also apply this in like how technology is being integrated in social systems and social institutions. So basically, normalization process theory is concerned with the social organization of work, implementation of making practices routine elements of everyday life, embedding, and of sustaining embedded practices in their social contexts. So basically, this helps us understand how new technology and new practices that used to be outside the way we do things in our social systems get to be introduced into our social system, and how it becomes something that is a part already of our social practices. And for this specific lecture, I'll make use of smartphones as an example of something that we didn't used to have as an everyday thing, and now it's basically integrated in all sectors of our lives. So first, let's define the word normalization. So normalization is the work that actors do as they engage with some ensemble of activities that may include new or changed ways of thinking, acting, and organizing in a social system, and by which means it becomes routinely embedded in the matrices of already existing socially patterned knowledge and practices. And we already learned a little bit about cultural diffusion and how technologies are adopted by a population. We know that there's a sector of a population who are innovators, the one who innovates and creates the technology and the services that are new. There are the early adopters, or the set of the population who first tries out the new technology. And then we also have the late adopters. The late adopters are those who kind of wait before they integrate a certain technology into their lives. And then we also have what we call the laggards, those who really resist new technology. So for example, when we talk about, say, using smartphones, right? So for example, iPhone releases a new cell phone, and the ones who created iPhone are the innovators. And then we also have the early adopters. The early adopters are the ones who will, be the first ones to purchase this new smartphone and try it out and integrate it into their lives. And then we have the late adopters who will kind of like see and observe before they purchase the product. No, let's see what the early adopters think, and if it looks like it improves their lives, then that's the time I'm going to purchase and integrate that technology into my life, no? And then we also have the laggards. Yun naman yung mga, usually ito yung mga lola natin na who's very resistant against technology. Hindi nila masyadong bet yung smartphones or yung mga advanced na smartphones. Okay na sa kanila yung for texting lang and for calling. So that's example of the levels of the way we adapt to technology in our culture. So we have four. We have the innovators, we have the early adopters, we have the late adopters, and then we have the laggards. So now that we know that in a given institution or in a given organization or social group, there will always be the mix of those four. And there's a need for technology to be integrated in our lives because, society demands it, the situation demands it. Like for example, online classes, the situation demands it. Now, despite having innovators, early, late adopters, and laggards, we need to put this into our system. And how do we do that? How do we put things in our system, make it a part of our routine to the point that it doesn't seem like something new anymore? It's something that's embedded already in our lives. So that's the process of normalization. How do we embed in our everyday lives something that used to be so different or something so innovative? So here are the summary statements of the normalization process theory. Okay, the first statement is material practices become routinely embedded in social contexts as the result of people working individually and collectively to implement them. So in short, in order for us to be able to embed a new practice into our social systems and into our social groups, people should individually use them, collectively and collaboratively use and implement them so that they could put it in their routine. Malamang sa alamang, di ba? Kung gusto natin na maipasok ang isang bagay sa ating routine, we have to do it. Very simple logic there. Statement number 2. The work of implementation is operationalized through 4 generative mechanisms, and we'll talk about them later in detail. We have coherence, cognitive participation, collective action, and reflective monitoring. And the production and reproduction of a material practice requires continuous investment by agents in ensembles of action that carry forward in time and space. Now, if we want something to be routinized in our lives and in our social systems, people have to invest on it emotionally, psychologically, socially, personally, individually, in order for us to make this work and make this a part of our lives to the point that it's not anymore weird to have it in our lives. So there has to be some investment in order to reproduce that practice in our social systems. So this is the diagram of the normalization process theory, and we'll come back to this when we have already discussed the definition of each context and concepts inside the boxes. So the first component of the theory is coherence. So coherence is the practice, an ensemble of beliefs, behaviors, and acts that manipulate or organize objects and others is made possible by a set of ideas about its meaning, uses, and utility. So in short, there should be some sort of collective understanding that a certain technology is needed in our social systems before we get to really include that in our daily routines, no? So for example, cell phones, right? So we have to sort of understand that there is a utility in smartphones, that it gives some sort of ease and convenience in the way we do our lives. E-commerce, social media, interactions, right? Computing, because it's also a mini computer. And as the time, we can decide that, okay, this is something that we can include in our individual lives. That's coherent, that's individual, or something that we could use as like for an organization. Like for example, integrating e-commerce into our business, or integrating LMS into our cell phones for school. Next, second component is cognitive participation. And cognitive participation is the production and reproduction of coherence in a practice requires that actors collectively invest meaning in it. So in short, we all have to think that putting these smartphones into our daily lives is important, and we have to invest in it in order for us to say that this is something that can work in a specific social dimension in our lives, like for example education, communication, leisure, or e-commerce. Now, in terms of cognitive participation, the proponents of this study has identified 4 phases of cognitive participation. So first we have initiation. Initiation involves work that brings a practice forth. It requires that actors are enrolled across social and socio-technical networks. So for example, in online learning, we do initiation by, migrating everyone to the Canvas, to the learning management system, and make sure that they're there so that they're connected with the socio-technological network where learning is going to be done during this pandemic. Next, we have enrollment. Enrollment involves actors working together and organizing themselves to participate in new practice. So in the process, for example, of online learning, we had orientation with the faculty, with the students, with the administrators of how we can maximize the use of Canvas for LMS, and being able to orient them with what to do, setting forth rules and policies of how we'll be able to do and migrate all our educational experiences into the LMS. Next, we have legitimization. So when we say legitimization, it requires the work of interpreting and buying into that practice in relation to institutionally shared beliefs about the proprietary and value of knowledge and other existing practices. So going back again to my online learning example, it becomes legitimized when there are no other options that are available, or the other options available for us seems not feasible or not as good as the option that we are considering. And of course, we have no other options right now. That's why we legitimized online learning as a main way or medium to have our online classes right now. So na-legitimize na siya. Legitimation is essential for a practice to be generally activated in context where actors work together to decide the procedures by which it is to be enacted and how engagement with it is defined. This decision-making work leads to activation of practice, bringing forth the materials and means that we are able to do online classes right now. And this is what we are actively using right now, and this is the only thing that we are using for our online classes. So that's activation. So the four phases of cognitive participation of initiation, enrollment, legitimization, and activation. Next, we have collective action. So for collective action, it means we interact with already existing practices. And the production and reproduction of a practice requires that actors collectively invest effort in it. So, like we said, education, formal education, your syllabus, your curriculum is there. So the question now is, how do we integrate it now to the new practice of online learning? So that is what collective action is about. How do we integrate online learning LMS with the present educational system and resources that we have? Now, there are organizing factors and immediate factors that basically influence collective action or the integration of new technology or new practices in the already existing practices. So for the immediate factors, we have interactional workability, which refers to how actors operationalize the new practice. So operationalizing may be through the use of samples that is taken from the internet, or setting up policies and procedures in order for it to be done. Next immediate factor is relational integration. It refers to the way that a practice is mediated and understood within networks of people around it. And in the beginning of our online classes, that's how we tried to be able to make decisions about how we are going to do this online class. We negotiated the terms and conditions of how our lectures will be, how our outputs will be. Now, we had an agreement of what are the expectations from the side of the teacher and the side of the students. So that's relational integration. How will LMS define our social relationships? Next, for organizing factors, the first quality that we have to look into is skill set workability, which describes the distribution and conduct of work that distributes a practice in a division of labor. So basically, it means that this is how people in a given organization distribute the new sets of skills needed to be able to integrate this new technology. So, for example, in terms of the LMS, we kind of, at least from the perspective of De La Salle, we kind of identified what is the new role of the teachers and what is expected of them in terms of the skills that they need to have in order for them to run a class. And then of course we have our deans and chairs and the education administrator. What do we expect them to do in order to be able to guide us in relation to delivering the best education for the students, and the new skills that they have to have, like for example managing a meeting in a Zoom conference, which is of course not everyone has like an intuitive knowledge of how it will work, because of course prior to the pandemic we didn't have that that often. So that's example of skill set workability, the being able to have the skills that we need in order for us to get into the new technology that we are integrating into our social systems. And second, we have contextual integration, which refers to the incorporation of a practice within a social context. And in this case, the context that we are integrating our canvas, our Animo space, is through, the very culture of La Salle. So we still see the core values of La Salle. We still see the spirit of Animo in the way that it is being taught. We still make sure that we uphold the excellence and the vision, mission of the school. We also make sure that you still get the a similar experience that you would have as a Lasallian student. So that's contextual integration. So these four factors, interactional workability, relational integration, skill set workability, and contextual integration, has something to do with collective action. And finally, the fourth component is reflexive monitoring. It is the pattern of collective action, and their outcomes are continuously evaluated both formally and informally by participants in implementation processes. So basically, we always check with you how do you find the online classes. There are surveys done by the administration among students, among faculty, among administrators of what are the difficulties and what are the weaknesses and strengths in conducting an online classes. That you have had this especially during the last part of term 2. So this is an example of reflexive monitoring. So now that we are currently engaging in our new technology, our new practice, how are we doing with it? How are we integrating it into our daily lives, into our daily work lives? Yon. So reflexive monitoring. Reflexive monitoring has four phases. The first one is systematization. It refers to the methodological formality of these judgments and the rationalities that underpin them. So, what is the systematization that we have? Of course, we have the surveys. We have the help desks. You can also message directly the teacher about your problem. So, formalizing these structures of how you will be giving your feedback and evaluation is a form of systematization that is part of reflexive monitoring. Next is communal and individual appraisal, the ability for us to objectively evaluate and monitor ourselves in relation to how we are adapting to the new technology that we have for this new normal. And we also have reconfiguration, which basically is we have evaluations available. There are bad sides to it, there are good sides to it. And so the configuration is basically changing the way we use the new technology in order for us to be able to deal with and address with the bad aspects that we have seen in the feedbacks and evaluations in the way we're using this technology. So that's the configuration. So, in the process of normalization of new technology into practice, we generally have a given organizing structure and social norms of how a social context normatively accommodates a practice. So in our case, organizing structures and social norms are basically our culture in De La Salle University. And then we also have group processes convention that says about how a practice is produced and reproduced in an actual pattern of interpersonal behavior. So how our interactions with each other as social entities of the university are able to reproduce and produce new and continue old social practices. So in introducing a new technology, we have to have coherence, and that coherence, that putting meaning into the practice must be engaged with the individuals through cognitive participation. And that cognitive participation must already be integrated into our normal and usual practices via collective action that is affected by organizing factors and immediate factors. And of course, in this integration into our daily social systems and social practices of the new technology, we do reflexive monitoring to be able to see whether it's working for us, and of course be able to reconfigure our new practices to address the bad aspects of it. And if you can see the arrows, these four components are not really something that's coming really linear. So you can see that people can always go back to re-enrolling people, reinitiating people, legitimizing the process if it doesn't work in collective action. So you go back, probably there's something working with initiation, probably there was we legitimized too early, or we didn't activate the people into the process. That's why we need to come back. Or for example, in terms of reflexive monitoring, we were able to see a lot of bad aspects in the new technology. So probably we need to go back and see how we do our collective actions. Probably we don't have enough skill sets, so let's reconfigure that. Or probably we're not able to do interactional workability, and probably let's deal with that in order for us to have an improved integration of the new technology into our lives. So let's go back to my example, cell phones. So let's say that you're going to integrate e-commerce via smartphone technology for your business. Let's say you are running a food and beverage business. So let's just complete the process using an example. So let's just complete the process in order for us to be able to understand it as a whole. So for instance, you own a food and beverage business and you want to integrate smartphone technology into your business in terms of going and migrating to e-commerce, especially during this pandemic, and you want to integrate that for the social systems in your business. The first step is you have to place meaning on the new technology that you are going to integrate into your social systems in your business. And of course, you have to give positive meaning to this new technology so that it will work for you and the integration of this new technology can start. So now that you've decided to integrate your smartphone technology to your business, then you have to initiate the people who are working with you, your employees. You have to get them on board, and be able to initiate them in the process, to be able to enroll them into the process, in terms of the app development and also the use when it's already available. And you have to legitimize it. How do you legitimize it? You now involve your customers. You tell them, hey, I now have a presence in your smartphone app. I have now a smartphone app. It's something that we now use in order for us to get orders from our clients. So if you want to reach us, you can reach us via this smartphone app. So marketing it that way legitimizes the process. So it increases cognitive participation of your employees, through putting policies, new policies in your work in order for them to be able to make use the app effectively as employees. And also you legitimize it to your customers by announcing to them and marketing that we now have an app that can serve you. Now, after putting your customers and your employees on board, then you have to do some sort of collective actions because you still want to maintain your existing practices, which is your food and beverage business, into the new technology, which is your smartphone app. So what you do, you have to improve the skill set of your employees. You have to make sure that they could interact with our customers using that app, and then you make sure that it's within the context of your brand. You still maintain your branding in your smartphone and relational integration, to make sure ganun pa rin, to improve or maintain the relationship that you have with your clients and your customers despite, migrating into the app. So kung ano yung process at kung ano yung experience nila while going to your restaurant, that should also be the experience that they have when they deal with you via the app. So that's collective action. And of course, you have to do reflexive monitoring. So you have to see, is having a smartphone app really effective for my business? So there are many ways that you could formalize your evaluation process. It's either, did I have many orders, right? Did I have logistical problems? What is my rating in the App Store? What is the nature of the comments that I have? And also get some sort of informal evaluation from your employees. How do you feel about migrating or integrating smartphone technology or putting our restaurant in the smart apps? Does it make sense to you? Is it making life harder for you? How do you think we can make it better? And then from the comments that your customers have and your employees have, you try to reconfigure whatever you need to reconfigure. There are bugs in your app, then you have to reconfigure that until there comes a time wherein you have already fully integrated the application in your business. It's not anymore a hard thing for you. It's something that's routine. It's not anymore something that's out of ordinary for you. And hopefully, it becomes a better thing for your business. Now, you have to take note that this is a mid-range theory. So when we say mid-range theory, this tries to explain systems and behaviors of social groups and organizations. It might be difficult to look into this, like how does Philippines integrate new normal. I think there are other nuances that could not be explained using this theory. But at least for your specific social groups that you belong in, your friends, your family, your school, your business, this could be a good way for you to be able to maximize the integration of a new normal, a new practice, a new material, a new technology into your lives and your social systems. So in this video, we were able to learn about the new normal. What does it mean? and how it has been seen historically. And because of that, we want to make sure that this new normal becomes something that's really normal for us. We want this new normal to be normalized in our lives so that we'll be able to survive this pandemic. And that's the reason why we also discussed about the normalization process theory, and we talked about the concepts and the statements and the principles related to the theory. And then we applied that to two distinct examples. So the first one, we have online classes, and we have two application of smartphone technology in business.